All right, so our next speaker, back when she worked in animal rescue, which was a long time ago, she had a Class A commercial license, and she was able to parallel park a semi-truck. I can't even imagine seeing that. Everyone, please welcome Jessica.
I'm Jessica Duncan. I'm a marketing data scientist at Greenlight. I'm also a teaching assistant at Northwestern in their School of Professional Studies and their graduate data science program. And I'm really excited. This is actually my first time here at New York, our conference in person. I've done it virtually several times. And you already saw the spoiler. I was supposed to be here last year, but I had twins. And we have some good reading material for them. Thank you. Clearly, so they're getting a good start. They'll pass me up soon enough, I'm sure. But we're here to talk about marketing channel attribution and what it is and why it's important and how we can do it better with R. So at the base level, marketing attribution is understanding which of your customers' touch points along their customer journey with you are most influential in converting them to a purchasing customer. And touch points can be anything from social media, whether it's paid social media or organic social media. It might be traditional media like print, TV, radio, podcast, newspaper, or it could be email marketing, your website, a phone customer service center if you have anything like that. Touch points can also be things that you can't necessarily track well, like word of mouth. But as a marketer, we want to drive our marketing efficiency well with our spend, right? We have a certain amount of money that we get to put towards all these channels, and we want to divvy it up in such a way that it brings us the most customers with the fewest costs, right? Marketing efficiency. So we need to know how to take all of those dollars across all of those different channels that we might have and get the most customers, the biggest bang for our buck, right? So let's walk through a hypothetical. Let's say that we have a company that sells baby shoes, and I can tell you from personal experience, baby shoes are among the cutest and least functional things in the world, but you absolutely need them. So we sell baby shoes, and we have social media ads, and we managed to get our social media ad in front of a parent who's scrolling Instagram maybe one day while the kid is napping. And they come across this ad and they think, oh my God, these are the cutest shoes I've ever seen. I absolutely have to have them. And they click through the ad, they land on our website. And they find a handful of shoes that they love, they add them to their cart. They're almost done, they almost get through the checkout process, and then baby wakes up crying. And so parent scampers off to go do parenting things and care for the baby. And then as a marketing team, we notice, hey, there's a cart that's been sitting there for a while and nobody's finished it. So let's fire off an email and say, hey, did you forget your cart? So we send that email. Later that evening, parents checking email, sees our email, thinks, the shoes, clicks through, buys the shoes, everybody's happy, the end, right? So you've probably had an experience like that before. You've certainly seen social media ads. Maybe you've interacted with them. You've probably gotten a hey, did you forget your cart type of email from a company before. And this is just one example of a customer journey, right? This was a pretty simple, straightforward one. But they're not always simple, and they also don't always end in a conversion. Customers can have many, many touch points with your company and never actually purchase anything, or they might come directly to you, again, maybe through word of mouth. They just go straight to your website and buy something, and they didn't have any traditional marketing touch points in that sense. And so that's where marketing attribution modeling helps us to understand all of these different things, right? We put all these touch points together in all the different combinations that they could possibly exist, and then we say, which of these is working well for us, and where should we put more of our marketing dollars? Or maybe more topically the last few years, we're having our marketing budget reduced. Where can we take money away and have the least impact on our overall sales and conversions? So let's talk about kind of how we traditionally handle marketing attribution first, and then we'll talk about the better way to do it. So rules-based is where many marketing departments are still sitting, and single touch is also still a very common way to handle marketing attribution. Those two are first touch and last touch, and they really are exactly what they sound like. It's giving 100% of the credit to a sale to the very first marketing touch point that a customer has or the very last touch point that a customer has. So in our hypothetical situation, we would either give 100% of the credit for our sale to that Instagram ad, or we would give 100% of the credit to the sale to that marketing forgotten cart email that we sent. Now you can see the problem with that. Of course, it's ignoring everything else between, but it's also ignoring the relationship between those two things. Our customer may never have even remembered they were shopping for baby shoes if we hadn't sent them that email, and we also wouldn't have had a reason to send them the email if they'd never seen the Instagram ad to start with. So believe it or not, there's still a lot of marketing departments that are sitting right here, using either first touch or last touch as their way of assessing their marketing channels. There is a better way to do it. One sort of step up, but still not quite there, is multi-touch attribution, but still rules-based. And so these are still very formulaic, where we take however many marketing touch points we have, and we say this is how we're divvying up the credit for those touch points. So one would be linear, where we give equal credit to every touch point along a customer journey. And you could see where that potentially would be problematic with difference in intent, right? There's a difference in customer intent from passively scrolling and just happening to see one of your ads versus getting to your website, filling out a form, giving you their email address so you can stay in touch, right? Those are different intents from a customer level, so you may not want to give equal credit to those touch points. Other multi-touch attribution rules-based options are U-shaped and time decay. And this is where we're sort of trying to walk this line of we want to give credit to more than just the first or the last, but we don't exactly know how to do it, so we're just going to kind of throw some numbers at it, right? U-shape says we're going to give a lot of credit to the first touch and the last touch and a little bit in between. And time decay says we're going to give the most credit to the most recent touch point and then sort of stair-step it down. These numbers are sort of made up and hypothetical. You could set any percentage that you wanted. And so they're, again, trying to move away from that single touch mentality, but they're still not necessarily the best way to do it. With time decay, or U-shaped for that matter, you're ignoring the difference in length of customer journeys, right? Our hypothetical, our parent who was scrolling Instagram, that was maybe a several hours long customer journey from first touch point to purchase. Your customers may have days or weeks long journey. And so then how do we treat that time decay of most recent versus least recent if they were a few hours apart or days or weeks apart? So a better way exists, and it's actually quite easy with R. There's a package that does it for you very well. And Markov chain is the sort of math underlying it. So we'll walk through what is a Markov chain and how do we use it in marketing attribution. Markov chain is a way of understanding the likelihood of moving from one state to another state or staying in the same state. So it's a probabilistic model. We'll use another baby example. Let's say these are the 3 states that my twins could be in at any given time. They're either smiling, crying, or they're asleep. And so the likelihood then of them moving through these states, maybe, we'll say they have a 32% chance of staying happy, 26% chance of starting to cry, or a 42% chance of falling asleep. You'll notice those numbers add to 100%. So for each sort of spoke in the chain, we have to have a probability that adds to 1 of either staying where we are or moving somewhere else. And same for crying, either staying where we are or moving to sleeping or happy. And sleeping, staying asleep, starting to cry. There we go. Or starting to smile. So this is an example of a very simplified Markov chain. But in terms of marketing attribution, this would be a situation where each of these steps would be a marketing channel, right? We would say it's a social media exposure, it's a traditional media exposure, radio, TV, newsprint, what have you, right? And so the attribution then looks at what's the probability if somebody comes in through social media that they're either going to directly convert or they're going to maybe have another touch point or another 2 or 3 touch points before they convert. And that helps us get a more holistic view of our marketing program in total instead of looking at it in a very specific rules-based chunk. So let's look at some code, which is the fun stuff. As I mentioned, the package here, channel attribution, which we'll talk more about in a second, really kind of does all the work for you, which is great. But you, of course, have to start with data. In the real world, we know that getting the data, getting it clean, is the hardest part of any modeling process, right? And particularly with marketing, that's become more challenging over the last several years when we have privacy rollouts from iOS and Google making it harder to track what impressions somebody might have directly with us. So for example's sake, we're going to have perfectly beautiful, clean data that we're just going to create ourselves. But in the real world, you, of course, would want to get your data and get it as clean as possible before you would start this process. So this chunk of code really just creates some data out of thin air for us to use. We're calling our marketing channels A, B, C, D, E, and F. and then we're creating some random samples of fake touch points with customers. So the output of this is, here we go, really 3 channels. You have a way to identify your customer, so a customer ID, for example. You have a date or a timestamp or something that allows you to put those touch points in order from most recent to least recent in terms of when they happened. And then you have an identification of this is the channel, this is the touch point that they had. Now getting this in a sort of understanding what it looks like overall, that line of code estimates roughly 6,500 customers with 50,000 touch points over roughly 6 months with a typo. And this is an estimation of the number of touches in each of those paths. So for our fake data, most of our customers have something like 7 or 8 touch points with us before their customer journey ends. Now their customer journey can end in a purchase, or their customer journey could end without a purchase. It would just stop. They would have no more marketing touch points. But this is what we're looking at. Some customers have a whole lot of touch points, some have very few. Most have somewhere in the 7 to 8 range. Now, getting it in the structure that the channel attribution package uses is pretty simple as well. It's a relatively short piece of code that takes our ID, date, channel, data frame, and puts it into order, essentially, so that you have 1 row per customer. Each touch point is in order from the first to the most recent. And then it has either conversion or non-conversion. So that's what it looks like at the end. You can see the greater than symbol really is what indicates that we're moving from channel to channel. And this is, again, just the format that the channel attribution package wants. So we have our customer ID, we have our path, and then we have conversion or not conversion. This is the package that I've used. Again, it's very straightforward. It does all the stuff for you, so it's relatively easy for a marketer to use, and I say that as a former marketer. The great thing about it is it not only is going to give you the Markov chain version of channel attribution, but it's also going to show you that first touch and last touch and linear, so you can compare and see what the results would be if you did it any number of ways. The code to get that is also very simple. 2 lines. The HMOD line here is what gives you your single touch and your multi-touch rules-based version, and the mmod is what gives you the Markov chain version of attribution. Each of them just takes your data frame, the column that has your path in it, the column that has your conversion in it, and this is what it spits out. So on the left, you see the first touch, last touch, and linear attribution of each of those channels, how many sort of win a conversion, right? And on the right side, you see the Markov chain math behind it of once we put it through that probabilistic approach, then how many conversions does each of those channels get credit for? And we can make this prettier. We can make it nicer for our stakeholders to look at. This is using ggplot. I don't have the code up here just because it's a little longer, but it is on GitHub for anybody who is curious. So this, you can see, directly compares what our attribution is per channel and how it differs between the approaches. So first touch versus last touch, for instance, for channel E and channel A are quite different, right? They completely flop. So depending on how you're approaching first touch or last touch in a single touch attribution world, you're gonna get very different answers for those 2 channels in particular. But in this case, you can see channel A and channel E aren't actually working maybe as hard for us as we thought they were when you put them through the Markov chain. And by contrast, channels B, C are actually maybe working a little better for us than we thought. And so I like this approach because it gives us, I think, again, a more holistic view of what is our whole picture of our marketing, not just where people come from, not just where they end, but what was their whole journey throughout their process as a customer, and how much credit should we give to each of those touch points. Another output is the transition matrix, and this tells you the probability of moving from one channel to another channel throughout your process as a customer. And again, we can make this prettier because this is not easy to look at. And we only have 6 channels in this example. Imagine if you had many more. This again is just using ggplot, and it's taking those same numbers, throwing them up here. So as an example to walk through, over on the y-axis or at the origin, you see start. And then as you go across the row, those are the probabilities that a customer is going to come into a customer journey with us through any of those channels. So the highest likelihood is that a customer will enter a customer journey through channel B, and the lowest likelihood is that they'll enter through channel C. And again, if you were to add all these up, you'd see each row adds to 1. And then sort of following that along, if they're most likely to come in through channel B, let's go back to the y-axis and say, well, if they're starting at channel B, then the most next likely place for them to land is actually channel E. The least likely place for them to land next would be a direct conversion. So estimating how people move throughout their customer journeys with you, helping you as a marketer to understand where are people most likely to go, where are they least likely to go. That process, again, of I've got a certain budget, and I either need to spend it wisely or more wisely, in terms of I'm having a budget reduced, so I need to stop spend but lose as few customers as possible, or all of a sudden I have more marketing money, where can I put it to gain the most? And this helps you, I think, to do that better than the single touch. A couple of things to consider. We talked about data. Do you have the data? Right, we mentioned things like word of mouth or even newspaper, right? Many moons ago when I worked in advertising, one of the things we did to track whether someone was seeing our newspaper ads was we had a different phone number on every single ad we ran, so then we could track what ad that particular person saw before they called us with questions. But do you have the data, or can you estimate it, or can you sample it? Also, Markov chain assumes that the movement between and among states is independent and that they do not influence each other. Before I worked at Greenlight, I worked at Boston Scientific, where I ran a model like this, and one of the sort of required steps of a customer journey there was to have a phone consultation. And so the first time we did this, the model essentially just said, well, just give it to everybody on the phone because then they convert. And that might be true, but you got to get their phone number from somewhere, right? So we ended up running 2 of these models, sort of pre-phone to understand what's the best way to get somebody to the phone. And then after phone, what's the best way to make sure they convert, which we talk to them. And then also thinking about timelines. How long is your customer journey? When do you restart it? If somebody began their customer journey with you 6 months ago, do you restart it at some point? If somebody purchases from you, do you then restart it, or does that purchase become another step towards their next purchase? Those are all things to consider. And list of resources, packages that I used, reference, and I've got 3 minutes left, so you can get to your coffee and stuff earlier than you might otherwise have. Thank you.